Dubai International Airport, Terminal 3, early morning, 16th February 2026. The city was waking under the usual warmth, a faint glow reflecting off polished marble and stainless steel. Flights landed in routine rhythm, passengers shuffled through immigration, and the day began as expected. Among them, however, was Meghan Markle, arriving under the expectation that Dubai would offer her discretion, a moment of pause, a shield from the incessant gaze of global media. Observers close to the planning of the trip describe it as deliberate, no spectacle, no grand announcements, merely a pause in a life increasingly dominated by headlines. Before we begin today's royal update, I want to take a quick moment. Many of you watch these videos but haven't subscribed yet, and you don't want to miss the latest developments and fascinating stories from the world of royalty. Subscribing is completely free and keeps you up to date as everything unfolds. And while you're here, let us know where are you watching from. Share it in the comments. It's wonderful to see viewers joining us from around the world. At approximately 9:40 a.m. local time, her passport was scanned. A flicker on the immigration screen paused the flow. Agents motioned her into a private area reserved for administrative review. Phones were not permitted. Cameras did not capture the moment. No explanation was given. The procedural silence was complete, almost clinical. Those who later recounted the event emphasized the absence of drama, noting that the decision had likely been made before the aircraft even touched down. The denial was not conditional, it was absolute. By 10:15, it was final, entry refused. No statements, no press conferences, no footage. Markle exited composed but visibly tense, not shocked, not confused, but unmistakably frustrated. Within hours, she had departed Dubai. The absence of spectacle itself became the statement. Dubai's operational logic differs sharply from Western celebrity culture. Here, visibility is not leverage, and apologies are not currency. Analysts suggest that the city evaluates high-profile arrivals on one metric above all: volatility. A person is not assessed by morality or fame, but by the potential disruption they may bring. Sources indicate that Markle's denial was triggered not by one headline or incident, but by accumulation. Months of media turbulence, conflicting public narratives, staff disputes, financial uncertainty, and reputational friction across multiple jurisdictions. Dubai did not need proof beyond reasonable doubt. It needed only to evaluate whether granting access could introduce operational risk. Silence was strategy. Unlike Western systems where controversy unfolds publicly, Dubai neutralizes uncertainty by removing it entirely. The decision resonates beyond the airport itself. Administrative denials, unlike public confrontations, are difficult to reverse. They do not respond to pressure, public outcry, or social media campaigns. Reputation in this framework moves through advisors, former colleagues, diplomatic assessments, and risk briefings rather than tweets and headlines. Observers question the implications. If Dubai, with one of the most tightly controlled environments globally, assessed Markle as a risk, how many other jurisdictions had already reached similar conclusions silently? It was not rejection of an individual, but of a risk profile defined by unpredictability and reputational turbulence. Attention then turned to Markle's Canadian years, previously treated as neutral prelude to royal life. Between 2012 and 2015, Toronto had framed her professional ascent, culminating in her role on Suits. Yet renewed scrutiny revealed inconsistencies between published biographies and resurfaced claims regarding her personal life. Central were reports concerning Chef Corey Vitiello, a publicly known partner during this period. While their relationship was acknowledged, its duration, depth, and separation timeline were now contested. A Toronto-based investigative podcast amplified questions through anonymized testimony, linking past residency, cohabitation, and personal networks. Though not alleging illegal activity, it prompted renewed examination of her vetting prior to royal engagement. Rumors of sealed U.S. marriage records, allegedly from 2011, circulated concurrently. While unverified, legal experts noted potential procedural implications if such documentation had been withheld during background checks. Within Buckingham Palace, officials refrained from confirmation or denial, framing responses as due diligence reviews, focusing on disclosure standards rather than moral judgment. Public perception remained divided. Supporters criticized disproportionate scrutiny, Critics emphasized transparency and institutional accountability. Meghan's minimal public comment suggested strategic restraint, avoiding escalation, though some interpreted silence as evasive. By early February 2026, what began as media flare-up evolved into institutional concern. The past was no longer neutral. The handling of history itself became central. Attention shifted from the events themselves to how they were managed legally, commercially, and symbolically. Internal crisis response within Markle's team mirrored this complexity. Legal firms issued pre-litigation notices to outlets and platforms, emphasizing potential liability rather than alleging falsehoods. Takedown requests targeted content linking her to alleged records or vetting misrepresentation, often denied under public interest exemptions. The sheer volume of legal engagement signaled intent to fragment conversation, slow virality, and introduce risk calculations for publishers. Parallel to legal pressure, media strategy emphasized reframing. Opinion pieces appeared almost simultaneously across US and Canadian outlets, focusing on character conflict rather than factual dispute. Career-centric narratives minimized personal associations, positioning professional discipline and ambition as the dominant story. Brand recalibration followed, with expedited filings for a lifestyle platform signaling a pivot away from royal identity. Corporate partners adopted risk containment strategies, delaying responses, introducing conditional agreements, and extending review periods. Streaming and publishing requests increased diligence, encompassing historical affiliations and contractual disputes. The immediate outcome was a fragile equilibrium. Public debate remained high, but momentum shifted quietly in commercial and institutional circles. While Markle's team reacted through narrative and legal channels, Dubai's denial, combined with ongoing scrutiny, had set a precedent that could not easily be reversed. The first phase of this crisis closed not with spectacle but with procedural certainty, denial without confrontation, and a strategic signal that actions, even global celebrity ones, cannot bypass structured systems. Following Meghan Markle's abrupt denial of entry into Dubai, attention turned to the broader institutional and historical context that had quietly shaped this outcome. Observers noted that the incident was not an isolated operational decision, but rather the culmination of years of scrutiny, inconsistencies, and risk assessments spanning multiple jurisdictions. The Canadian years, once framed as a neutral prelude to royal life, became central in understanding the administrative calculations that underpinned Dubai's action. From 2012 to 2015, Toronto had been portrayed as a professional incubator, with Markle's role on Suits serving as a stepping stone toward global recognition. Yet newly surfaced testimonies, off-camera audio leaks, and social media artifacts suggested that elements of her personal life had been selectively presented in public narratives, raising questions about completeness and accuracy in subsequent vetting processes. Central to the renewed examination was Chef Corey Vitiello, publicly known as Markle's partner during her Toronto residency. While the existence of their relationship was undisputed, discrepancies regarding its timeline, cohabitation details, and eventual separation triggered renewed scrutiny. Analysts noted that the convergence of podcast testimony, corroborated by publicly available location data and date-specific interactions, created a narrative complexity that could not be ignored by institutional reviewers. Legal and royal vetting processes, observers argued, are designed to identify omissions that might translate into procedural risk. This does not hinge on moral judgment, but on whether undisclosed prior affiliations could impact formal approvals, future reputation, or operational stability in sensitive contexts. Adding to this complexity were persistent rumors of a sealed marriage record in the United States, allegedly dating to 2011. No court had verified its existence, yet the mere possibility introduced potential procedural consequences. Legal experts emphasized that if a prior marriage had existed and was knowingly undisclosed during royal vetting, it could constitute a technical breach, regardless of intent or legality. Buckingham Palace officials refrained from confirming or denying the claims, framing internal review as a due diligence exercise. Staff focused on documentation, disclosure standards, and timelines of public versus private record keeping. Analysts noted that such reviews are methodical, meticulous, and largely invisible, yet they carry weight that far exceeds that of media speculation. While institutional mechanisms operated quietly, Markle's team responded through an aggressive legal and media strategy designed to contain reputational damage. Pre-litigation notices were dispatched to multiple outlets, emphasizing potential liability without asserting falsity. Social media takedown requests targeted posts linking her to alleged sealed records or inconsistencies in public biographies. Platforms often denied these requests under public interest exceptions, but the cumulative legal activity slowed the dissemination of sensitive content and fragmented the narrative, creating procedural friction that limited viral momentum. Simultaneously, media messaging adopted a reframing approach. Opinion pieces in multiple jurisdictions emphasized character conflict rather than factual verification. Career-centric narratives minimized personal associations, focusing on professional discipline, ambition, and independence. Former colleagues were approached to provide supporting quotes, subtly repositioning Markle's Canadian years as a period defined by career development rather than intimate relationships. Brand recalibration ran in parallel, with expedited filings for a lifestyle platform signaling a pivot from identities closely associated with royal affiliation. Observers noted that such strategic repositioning serves two functions. It distances the individual from controversy while offering commercial partners a narrative of renewal. However, accelerated rebranding during an ongoing crisis can also be interpreted as evasion when historical questions remain unresolved. Commercial and corporate environments mirrored these adjustments. Agencies reported delays in exploratory talks, extensions of review periods, and conversion of revenue share arrangements into fixed performance structures. Memoranda of understanding in some cases lapsed without renewal, procedural outcomes that preserve discretion while avoiding confrontation. Financial analysts explained that such behavior is not punitive but protective. Brands evaluate not only audience reach but volatility exposure. When a public figure's profile requires constant contextualization, legal footnotes, and reputational disclaimers, the cost of association rises sharply. In streaming, media, and publishing, heightened diligence expanded to historical affiliations, prior contractual disputes, and residual controversies. Background checks went beyond standard practice to assess whether prior entanglements posed risks to institutional or partner stability. By mid-February 2026, the cumulative effect of these layered responses became evident. Public debate remained fixated on narrative control, legal positioning, and media framing, yet the quieter but more consequential shift occurred in commercial and institutional circles. Confidence pauses, conditional agreements, and extended review periods reflected market behavior under uncertainty. Strategic patience became essential, as each potential partner weighed not only commercial opportunity but reputational exposure. Institutional and commercial responses converged on one principle: uncertainty, even when unproven, carries tangible operational consequences. This intersection of personal, commercial, and institutional considerations underscores the complexity of Markle's position. The denial in Dubai was only the most visible manifestation of a broader, multi-layered evaluation that combined historical scrutiny, risk assessment, and strategic management of narrative volatility. Legal maneuvers, media strategies, and brand recalibrations served as immediate responses, but the structural decisions underpinning these reactions were largely determined by procedural logic, risk mitigation, due diligence, and containment. The first phase of public turbulence had closed, leaving in its wake an environment defined less by spectacle than by quiet institutional control, a framework that would shape subsequent developments for months to come. In the hours and days following Meghan Markle's denial of entry to Dubai, the reverberations extended far beyond the terminal and into global networks of power, influence, and reputation management. Analysts quickly identified that Dubai's decision, while operationally routine within its bureaucratic framework, carried international resonance precisely because of its discretion. Unlike Western responses, where controversy is publicly debated, Dubai acted silently, signaling a calculated rejection of potential volatility. This quiet removal had the effect of amplifying scrutiny elsewhere, particularly among institutions attuned to reputational risk. European monarchies, high-profile financial institutions, and global media conglomerates. Officials in London, Paris, and Abu Dhabi were reported to have quietly reviewed the circumstances, noting that the criteria applied in Dubai mirrored internal mechanisms used to assess risk across diplomatic, cultural, and commercial engagements. The question was operational, not personal. Does granting access to this individual create downstream turbulence, require continuous narrative management, or increase exposure to legal, media, or diplomatic complications? Observers noted that this assessment was unlikely to be unique. Dubai, like other tightly controlled jurisdictions, operates with a principle that visibility and unpredictability are liabilities. Any high-profile figure whose history intersects with multiple legal, media, and commercial spheres is evaluated for cumulative risk. Within royal circles, attention turned to the institutional implications. Buckingham Palace had been monitoring Markle's commercial and media activities, including brand partnerships, streaming agreements, and public appearances. Sources suggest that the palace viewed Dubai's move not as a punitive act, but as confirmation of a broader pattern. When celebrity visibility intersects with constitutional institutions, unpredictability must be neutralized. Internal reviews reportedly focused on documentation, disclosure standards, and whether any prior omissions could have operational consequences, particularly regarding engagements that might imply royal endorsement. The palace's approach, characterized by deliberate silence and procedural containment, underscored a long-standing principle. Institutions endure not through reactive measures, but through consistent, structural decision-making. The international media ecosystem reacted swiftly, but in fragmented ways. News outlets in the United States highlighted Dubai's denial as a public rebuke, while European publications framed it as a risk management decision, emphasizing administrative rationale over emotional narrative. Social media amplified interpretations, speculating on legal, personal, and geopolitical motives. Analysts observed that the sheer volume of commentary created its own volatility, forcing other institutions, corporate partners, media agencies, and advisory firms to reassess association risk independently. This decentralized recalibration mirrors market behavior. Multiple actors, acting independently yet toward the same end, generate an emergent consensus that is operationally impactful without coordination. Commercial repercussions unfolded quietly but decisively. Existing partnerships were reviewed for reputational exposure, and pending negotiations were subjected to extended due diligence. Streaming and content development discussions entered prolonged vetting periods. Background checks were expanded beyond typical industry standards to encompass historical affiliations, previous contractual disputes, and reputational volatility. Merchandising and lifestyle ventures underwent structural separation, minimizing personal attribution and limiting direct exposure. Analysts emphasized that these moves were protective rather than punitive, reflecting market logic under uncertainty. Association with high-profile individuals becomes increasingly contingent when perceived volatility exceeds potential benefit. Internationally, Dubai's decision prompted discussion among legal and diplomatic circles. Jurisdictional authorities noted that the procedural denial exemplified risk containment protocols common across highly controlled environments, yet rarely publicized. Unlike Western systems, which often allow controversy to play out publicly, these decisions are enacted in private to prevent speculation from creating operational complications. Legal advisors cited that the denial did not reflect criminal or civil judgment, but an administrative assessment of potential downstream exposure. For global observers, this nuance was critical. The absence of spectacle was itself a strategic tool, designed to neutralize attention while delivering definitive results. Within the UK monarchy, the episode reinforced internal doctrines of separation and continuity. Prince William, increasingly visible in matters of institutional integrity, emphasized measured responses and operational consistency. Senior aides described the approach as containment through credibility, reinforcing structural boundaries rather than reacting emotionally. Invitations and ceremonial access were carefully managed. They were not revoked outright, but controlled through procedural channels, ensuring alignment with constitutional expectations. Legal teams focused on long-term implications of minor symbolic associations, particularly regarding children and their depiction in media or commercial ventures. This quiet recalibration highlighted the monarchy's broader strategic focus. Enduring relevance is maintained not through public argumentation, but through disciplined structural authority. At the same time, Markle's team faced mounting pressure to maintain momentum amid commercial and reputational uncertainty. Legal maneuvers, media framing, and brand repositioning continued, but they encountered resistance from a network of independent actors, partners, platforms, and advisors, evaluating exposure risk without deference to narrative appeal. Analysts noted that this asymmetry between public messaging and private operational control created structural constraints. Momentum-based personal brands rely on continuous visibility, yet institutional scrutiny, procedural reviews, and international risk assessment slowed the ability to generate and leverage public attention. The convergence of these factors, Dubai's silent denial, institutional recalibration, commercial caution, and global media amplification, illustrates the complex matrix governing high-profile figures in the modern era. While headlines focused on spectacle, the substantive consequences were procedural, structural, and long-term. By mid-February, the episode had shifted from a single denial to a multi-layered case study in reputation management, risk assessment, and the enduring power of institutional discretion. The unfolding scenario highlighted a fundamental principle. In environments where predictability is valued over notoriety, silence, procedural rigor, and controlled access carry more weight than public declarations, reshaping both opportunity and perception. As the immediate turbulence surrounding Meghan Markle's denied entry to Dubai began to subside, attention shifted toward long-term ramifications, both for her personal brand and for the broader institutional ecosystem she engaged with. Analysts emphasize that high-profile figures operate in a complex web where visibility, credibility, and control are interdependent. In Markle's case, the disruption created by the Dubai incident had ripple effects across commercial partnerships, media engagements, and global perception. Unlike short-lived crises, this event highlighted structural vulnerabilities inherent in momentum-based personal brands, where dependence on continuous narrative reinforcement intersects with institutional scrutiny and market risk management. Commercial partners, particularly those in lifestyle, media, and content development sectors, responded by recalibrating exposure to the Sussex brand. Deals in negotiation were paused or conditionalized, with clauses explicitly limiting liability for reputational volatility. Advisors described this as a confidence pause. Partners were not canceling outright, but were reassessing the risk-return balance in a new context where narrative unpredictability carried measurable cost. In entertainment, streaming platforms expanded due diligence, incorporating not only standard financial checks, but also reputational and historical analyses. Development cycles were lengthened, greenlight decisions delayed, and contingency mechanisms inserted into contracts. This reflected a broader trend in the post-2024 media landscape, where investors and platforms increasingly weigh narrative stability alongside creative potential. Beyond corporate risk, the incident influenced legal and regulatory approaches. International legal observers highlighted that Dubai's administrative denial served as both precedent and signal. It underscored the principle that high-profile figures with complex histories may encounter operational restrictions even absent formal legal violations. In Western media, the narrative focused on spectacle and controversy, but among legal and diplomatic professionals, the emphasis was on precedent, procedural integrity, and risk mitigation. Experts suggest that such cases influence not only individual mobility, but also the strategies of corporate and institutional entities that must manage exposure across jurisdictions. In practice, this can manifest as heightened scrutiny of disclosures, accelerated contractual audits, and proactive mitigation of potential liability exposure. Media and public discourse, meanwhile, evolved in complexity. Analysts noted that sustained attention to procedural and institutional factors gradually displaced immediate emotional reactions. Social media, initially dominated by outrage and speculation, began to fragment, with new narratives focusing on risk management, institutional resilience, and operational decision-making. Opinion pieces across multiple regions emphasized that the denial was less a moral judgment and more a calculated approach to predictability. Within this reframing, public perception became contingent on understanding both the nuance of administrative risk and the contrast between celebrity expectations and institutional imperatives. Within royal circles, the episode reinforced strategic lessons about boundaries and brand insulation. Internal sources indicate that Buckingham Palace undertook comprehensive reviews of commercial, legal, and public-facing activities associated with the Sussex brand. Special attention was paid to engagements implying royal endorsement, including digital content, lifestyle partnerships, and media collaborations. Policies were quietly tightened regarding the depiction of minors, use of royal symbolism, and public association with institutional status. This strategic reassertion of perimeter control reflects a long-standing principle. Maintaining institutional credibility requires proactive boundary management rather than reactive commentary. For Markle personally, the implications were both operational and reputational. Brand flexibility, the capacity to pivot between platforms, projects, and markets, was constrained by intensified scrutiny. Every public move required contextual analysis, legal oversight, and media framing. Analysts note that this creates an asymmetry. While institutional actors can operate quietly, high-visibility individuals are forced to manage multiple audiences simultaneously. Momentum-dependent brands, particularly those built on narrative engagement and celebrity presence, are acutely sensitive to these constraints. Every silence is interpreted, every message dissected, and every delay magnified. Simultaneously, strategic recalibration occurred in the media ecosystem. Journalistic and opinion networks increasingly emphasized systemic patterns rather than isolated incidents, highlighting cumulative reputational risk as a central concern. Podcasts, social commentary, and industry analysis began framing Markle's trajectory within global patterns of celebrity-institutional interaction, operational discretion, and cross-border risk. Legal advisors and PR specialists frequently cited these narratives as both reflective and predictive. Understanding how institutions respond to perceived volatility provides actionable guidance for brand management, contract negotiation, and media engagement. Looking forward, observers suggest that the Dubai incident will remain a touchstone in studies of celebrity, monarchy, and institutional authority. It highlights the tension between visibility-driven personal brands and durability-driven institutions, offering lessons in patience, structural control, and the limits of narrative influence. Whereas traditional scandals are often resolved through public apology, engagement, or legal clarification, this episode demonstrates the power of procedural containment, operational silence, and reputational discretion. Institutions, particularly constitutional or globally visible ones, can achieve strategic advantage not by overt confrontation, but through measured, principled action that gradually reshapes perception without direct engagement. For the broader public, the episode underscores the interplay between media, perception, and institutional power. While social commentary focuses on immediacy and emotion, the operational reality reflects a multi-layered network of decision-making, risk assessment, and long-term strategic planning. For high-profile figures, this creates both opportunity and constraint. Public visibility can generate influence, but it also attracts scrutiny that may have far-reaching, often unanticipated consequences. Analysts conclude that Markle's Dubai denial will continue to serve as a case study in balancing narrative control, institutional interaction, and commercial resilience in an increasingly interconnected global environment.